Hello and welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint Show. I am your host, Jay Jones. Black Entrepreneur Blueprint was created specifically to educate and inspire Black entrepreneurs to launch, build, and grow successful businesses. Join us as we help build an economic power base in the Black community by promoting business ownership. If you are currently an entrepreneur or want to be an entrepreneur, we invite you to join us every week here at Black Entrepreneur Blueprint.
Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint, episode number 184. I'm your host, Jay Jones, and today we have another great revenue-generating episode for you. Today, guys, we're going to kind of piggyback off of last week's episode where I spoke about native advertising. And before we get into today's episode, let me just frame this for you. What I wanted to do in the beginning of 2018 is to give you some tactics, techniques, and strategies to increase your revenue and grow your business. So if you don't have revenue, you don't have a business. And cash flow is the lifeblood of any business. So I wanted to talk about certain techniques, strategies, and tactics that I use for myself and also for some of my clients to help generate revenues. Once again, no revenue, no business. So that's why I wanted to focus the beginning of January on these different strategies and tactics and techniques to help you guys out. So today's show topic is how a webinar generated $41,000 in revenue in 60 days, a real case study, and how you can use webinars too. I'm going to repeat that. How a webinar generated $41,000 in revenue in 60 days, a real case study, and how you can use them also, or use webinars too. Now, for those of you who've listened to the show for any period of time, know that I have several streams of income. I'm a big believer in that. So I have my products-based business, my e-commerce, and I also do coaching and consulting along with some other things to generate different streams of revenue. One of the things that I do is I work with a lot of attorneys. I kind of fell into that because I was doing stuff for one attorney and they referred me to another and so on and so on. So I've kind of made a niche in generating leads for attorneys. So today I want to talk about just one attorney that I work with in a case study, an actual study, and how webinars that I created have generated $41,000 in 60 days. And now he only spent $5,700 in ad spend to generate that $41,000, which is a 7x, 7 times return on investment, minus my fees. All right. So I got to get paid for that. So, but let me just tell you a little bit about the scenario. I received a call from an attorney that was referred from another attorney, and this attorney wanted to start a separate branch of his law firm. Normally he worked with personal injury, but he wanted to start doing loan modifications and bankruptcy. Now, loan modifications are for people that are behind on their loans, that they may be going into foreclosure, and the attorney can try to help you restructure that with the mortgage company. Now, you can do it yourself, but a lot of times it's a little easier if you have an attorney because the lender will take you more seriously. So I'm not going to get too much into loan modifications, but that's what they are. Bankruptcy, he does Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that also. This is what the scenario that we did, okay? Now, when the attorney came to me and told me he wanted to create these different, I guess you want to call it different departments in his law firm to generate additional revenue, I said, okay, that's fine and dandy. But when you talk about loan modifications and bankruptcy, that's something that's really in depth, both of those things, okay? I figured, I said, well, let's do a webinar where I'll ask you questions. It's almost like I'm interviewing him on a webinar. We'll have slides, we'll have disclaimers. As an attorney, there's certain things that he can and cannot say. So I told him, you handle that part, But I said, let's focus on the main questions that people ask about loan modification. We're just going to start with the loan modification webinar first. So I said, what are some of the main questions that people have about loan modifications? And we're going to present a webinar that's going to answer most of those questions up front. So it took us about 2 weeks to get everything together. He basically told me the questions, and then I formatted the actual webinar with the slides and everything. And we went back and forth about the questions. So it was almost like an interview via webinar. So I would ask certain questions and he would answer, and then we go through the slide series. Now, what he did at the end of the show, the end of the webinar, is he had who this is for and who this is not for. So he was kind of weeding out people. So if you're in this situation, A, B, C, D, this is for you. If you're not in that situation, then this probably won't help or won't work for you. Okay, so we created the webinar for loan modifications. Next, we created one for bankruptcy, which is another complicated issue because you can do a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13. Chapter 13 means that you have a repayment plan. Chapter 7 means everything gets wiped out. So if you have a home, most times if you're behind on your home, you want to do a Chapter 13 because you want to keep your home. It's a restructuring of your debt. All right. So we did the same thing. What are some of the common questions that you get as a bankruptcy attorney? Let's answer those questions within scope. Now, once again, as an attorney, there's certain things you can and cannot say by law. So I let them handle that part, but I put together the actual webinar based on the feedback or information that he gave me. This is how it worked. After we created the webinar, we actually did the first one live. What we did is we ran Facebook advertising and we ran native advertising. And that was episode 183. The previous episode, I talked about native. So we run ads about bankruptcy and also loan modifications. And when people clicked on those native ads, it actually took them to a website. It was part of the lawyer's attorney's website that talked about it. And within that website page, it had a link to join a webinar. So if they went to the page that talked about loan modifications, it would give a little pre-framing about what a loan modification is. For more information, if you want to go to the webinar, click this button and it had a webinar registration page. Same thing for the bankruptcy. So when they saw the native ad or the Facebook ad, that clicked on that and they went to a part of their website that talked about bankruptcy. If you need more information, and they had great titles on the articles, right? So if you need more information, click here. You can attend a free bankruptcy webinar. So that's how the flow works. So it started out with Facebook ads and native advertising, which drove them to separate web pages, which had links for the webinars. Okay. So with the loan modification, we did the interview, and I think the title of that one was Understanding Loan Modifications. That's the name of that webinar. And for the bankruptcy one, it was Understanding Bankruptcy and How It Can Save Your Home. So if you're in financial distress and you're at possibility of losing your home, then bankruptcy may be an option. But the great thing about these two things is they actually can play off of one another. If your loan modification doesn't work, you can actually look to bankruptcy. So when the people went to the loan modification one, if the attorney didn't think that they would be able to get a loan modification based on the information, he would talk to them about bankruptcy. So it was kind of neat because both of them intertwined and kind of played off of one another. So that was the workflow. Over the 60-day period that we're talking about, they generated $41,000 in revenue. All right. With the loan modifications, I think he charges $1,500 for loan modifications. And I think he got 9 of those. All right. So that came out to $13,500. And for his bankruptcy fees, he had, I think, 8 bankruptcies that he sold, 8 bankruptcies. And that was about like $28,000 or something like that. So it was about $41,500 or $41,000 in revenue in 60 days. And he only spent $5,700 in native advertising and Facebook advertising. So you can see the benefit of using webinars, especially when you have a complicated product or service. So webinars enable you to educate. And that's why they work so well, because it's not a salesy type pitch. It's education. And if this education makes sense for you, then let's move on to the next step. Now, there's certain steps when you create a webinar that you want to follow. All right. And I'm just going to breeze over these. One of the first things is, number one, who's the person giving the webinar? What are their credentials? So you want to give somebody, if he's an attorney and they specialize in A, B, and C, you want to give the background, the credentials, and a story. You know, how he helped somebody that was in bankruptcy, how they helped somebody with a loan modification. So you need validation. After that, you want to put together a great sequence of slides and a story within those slides. And those slides or that story needs to answer pretty much most of the questions that somebody will have for you. So you're knocking out everything. And at the end of the webinar, you must have a call to action. Now, before the call to action comes, you want to let people know if you have A, B, and C, this may help you. If you do not have A, B, and C, this probably will not help you. So basically, he's discounting or filtering the people that respond by telling them, okay, if you have a job, if you had a temporary loss of income, now you're back to work, a loan modification may work for you. But if you still don't have a job and your income situation didn't change, modification may not work for you because there's no change in income. So basically what he did was he filtered out at the end of the webinar, and he directed people that fit that profile to move forward with a call to action, which was a free consultation. And that was a free consultation on both of the webinars, on the loan mods and also the bankruptcy. So his whole objective was to get qualified people to raise their hand and reach out to him. And the great thing about the webinars is I use a software called Easy Webinar. There's a whole bunch of them out there. Webinar Jam, Easy Webinar. I mean, there's tons of them out there. And one of the reasons that I like Easy Webinar, and Webinar Jam does the same thing too, is they have what's called evergreen or automated webinars. So what we did was on the first webinar for the loan modifications, we recorded the Q&A at the end, which is a great part of a webinar. Always have a Q&A at the end of a webinar because you'll answer people's additional questions. And that's very important because there may be something that you didn't cover in your slide, in your webinar presentation, that is important. So what we did was we had the Q&A afterwards. And since it was a great webinar, he did a great job answering the questions and going through. We saved that webinar and we created what's called an evergreen webinar. Now, an evergreen webinar is not a webinar replay, so to speak, but what it is it gives the appearance of a new webinar, even though it's a recording. So if you've ever answered an ad or whatever to a webinar, and it says, oh, webinar is starting in 2 hours. A lot of times there'll be recorded webinars. They're recorded from a live one. You won't know it, though, because when you go on the webinar, you can't stop the webinar. If you come in 5 minutes late, you're not going to be able to go back to the beginning. And if you stop it, you're not going to be able to go back to the place you stopped it. So it functions as a live webinar. So a lot of times, you're looking at webinars that are actually pre-recorded. And that's why I like Easy Webinar. They have a nice and easy system to use to set up. And so that in itself was a big selling point to the attorney because he didn't want to do 3 to 4 webinars a week. So once we did a good webinar, we saved that one and we kept replaying it. So when we still run the same ads, Facebook and native advertising, and we would set specific times that the webinar would play. So if somebody landed on the native ad, then they clicked on, they want to sign up for the webinar, we may have it at Tuesday at 2 o'clock and Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And so they get to pick. The even better thing is, though, they have what's called just-in-time webinars on Easy Webinar. So you can set the webinar to start in 15-minute intervals. So it could be 12 o'clock, 12:15, 12:30, 12:45, 1 o'clock. Now, what happens is if I go on and register for the webinar and it's 12:05, it can ask me, okay, do you want to go to the 12:15 webinar? 15-minute increments. That means they have 10 minutes. And a lot of times when you are able to give that information to them quickly, you'll get a higher rate of people that go to your webinar as opposed to saying, oh, we don't have one that starts until 7 p.m. So that means they have to wait 7 hours and make sure they remember to get on the webinar. So a just-in-time webinar is very effective. And so what we found is that when people clicked on to the actual Facebook ad or the native ad, we had a conversion better with the just-in-time webinar because it was on the top of their mind. So we had a better conversion with people that had every quarter of an hour, the webinar would be available. Now, what they don't know is, they don't see all of those times. They'll just see the closest one to that quarter of an hour. Once again, they click on at 12:05. It'll say, okay, we have one at 12:15 today, or we have another one at 7 o'clock tomorrow. So it's not going to show them all of those options, 12:15, 12:30, 12:45, and 1 o'clock. So it can show them the just-in-time function, which is the next 15 minutes or next quarter of an hour, than any other times that you want that available. So that's what I like. And one of the things that the attorney liked was, and most of them do, is we get the best recording, we save that, and we use that as the webinar. And so you record it once and you benefit and profit off of it forever. So the great thing to them was they kept getting consistent flow of leads because with the marketing that we were doing, it was bringing in people clicking to the webinar. And so that was enabled them to actually have a return on investment, like I said, of over 700%, over 7 times what they spent, ad spend, which was $5,700, and they ended up making $41,000. So that's big. And that's why in 2018, I wanted to start off with some tactics, techniques, and strategies that will allow you to generate the revenue that you need. Now, for your business, now that was the attorney's business. If you have a business that webinars can be applicable for, I would definitely recommend that you do it. So if you have a service business, so once again, if it's a legal service, an accounting business, if you have a weight loss program. So in an accounting business, you could have a webinar, 10 steps to get a larger tax return. You could run Facebook ads to that, native advertising, get people to sign up for the webinar. You have your webinar, and at the end, you have a call to action. Same thing with weight loss. How to lose fat and keep it off. I saw a guy out there, and I actually went to the webinar just to check it out, and it looked like he was doing good numbers on that. So that's for service type businesses. Now for product businesses, software. Now the software I use, Easy Webinar, they have a webinar about their software, and that's how they sell it, because they go through and they tell you the benefits, the features, why you want to use it, and what it'll mean for your business if you do use it. I've also seen a lot of business opportunities being sold via webinar, and I've even seen physical products like supplements being sold via webinar, because it doesn't really matter, because once you record the webinar one time, it's always there to make money for you. So the flow goes, you go to a Facebook ad or native ad to your evergreen webinar. Now, once you get to the evergreen webinar, you have a call to action, and then you want to put pixels in that webinar so you can follow up with your people via email and Facebook and things of that nature. Now, we're not going to get into the segmenting and the email stream or stuff like that because it's too complicated and too in-depth, but I'm giving you an overview of how to use webinars to generate money for your business. All right, so once again, it doesn't matter if it's a product-based business or service-based business. Now, if you have a $5 product, you probably don't want to waste time doing a webinar sequence because it's really probably not going to make much sense. But if you have something like a supplement that can have recurring income, it would be a great idea to do a webinar. What does this supplement do? How does it work? What are some of the questions that people have? Okay, I'm working on a webinar for one of my supplements right now. So I'll keep you guys abreast of that. But anything that needs more explanation, a webinar is a great way to do it. So, I kind of liken webinars to infomercial, all right? You've seen all type of crazy infomercials about all kinds of stuff. You got the mop, the spinning mop, you got the squeegees. I mean, all kind of crazy stuff. I can't even think any off the top of my head right now. But really all they are is a form of education. They're educating you about their product, and it's just in an infomercial, commercial type platform. Whereas a webinar is more of an educational type platform. Okay, you can do the same thing with video. All right, you don't have to have quote unquote a webinar. You can have a video, and the video can do the same thing. So, but webinars, especially if you're selling higher priced product or services, it gives you the ability to interact with people And one of the other things that makes webinars effective is that if there's more than one person on the webinar, if there's a lot of people on the webinar, then that's almost like, okay, that's added proof. I'm not the only one that's interested in that. So it's a different type of mindset when you see other people commenting questions, at the end when you do Q&A, and you see other people asking in-depth questions. That kind of confirms that, okay, I made the right decision to come on here and let's see what these guys are talking about. So that one attorney, I'm his best friend because I'm doing the yeoman's job in terms of generating consistent results and consistent income by recording the webinar one time and creating a follow-up sequence, email sequence, retargeting sequence, be it Facebook, native advertising, and that's how that's working. So I just want you guys to realize we got to get this money. Right? Money is great. We need it to live. It's not the be all that ends all. But if you're in business to make money. So that's why I want to start 2018 out with shows that can help you generate more revenue. Native advertising last week. We're talking about webinars this week. And you don't have to be a master orator to do a webinar. Here's an example, like the attorneys I deal with. A lot of them are great attorneys, but they stink at marketing. So what I do is I make it simple, and all I do is an interview type process. We're going to go over the slide. Tell us about a time where your services helped somebody. How did that work? What was the outcome? What was the process? What is your process? Who does this work best for? Why do you do it? Why do you come to me? Why are you the expert? So it doesn't have to be polished like a TV show or an infomercial. It's really just getting out the information that people need. And that's why webinars are so effective. And now with automation and being able to do evergreen webinars, and I'm going to tell you guys, evergreen webinars work better than replayed webinars. Replayed webinars, you can go replay it at any time. But with an evergreen webinar, people are under the perception that it's a live event, meaning that if they come in late, they're going to miss it. So it's more of a sense of urgency. So once again, there's a ton of webinar software out there. I use Easy Webinar because to me, it is easy. I used to use Webinar Jam, but it was convoluted and it was a whole lot of different work. You had to get all these different Vimeo account, YouTube account, or Amazon S3 account. Easy Webinar, you don't need any of that stuff. So it's pretty simple and self-explanatory. So making money, guys, in 2018, we got to start off strong. I got an email from a BEB family member that touched me because I was in the same situation. Brother reached out to me, started a business. He had to go back into corporate because things didn't go right. He had kids, he had a family, and now he's trying to get back out. And I've been through that. So one of the things that I will tell you about webinars, even if you do have a job and if you're selling a product and or a service that has a little detail or complicated, create you an evergreen webinar, and while you're working, the webinars are still working for you. Now, what I also like about Easy Webinars, you can do a combination of live webinars and also an auto webinar. So you can actually run your webinar that's been recorded, but you can also answer any questions that people have via the chat. So you can let the webinar go, and while people are asking questions via chat, you can go ahead and answer the question. So you can do a full live webinar, you can do a full evergreen webinar, or you can do a hybrid, a combination of the webinar going and you actually answering the chat. So it's great. So if you still have a job and if you have a service business, a product business, or whatever, use webinars as educational tools. You don't want to be a super salesy webinar. Well, like they're selling the sham wow on TV and all these other infomercials. You want to educate people. Let them feel that they've made a smart decision by moving forward with your product or service. And that's what webinars can give you. It can give you credibility, especially if you tell a story of somebody just like them who used your services and what the outcome was. So we got to start using the tools and automation around us to help build our businesses. That's what we're out there for, man. They're out there to help us. And so we need to start putting all of this stuff together. So Facebook, native advertising, webinars, whatever your thing is, start using this automation and putting it together where now you're working smart, not hard. All right? We still want to always work hard, but we all want to work smart first and foremost. So if I don't have to do 4 webinars a week, that's great. I get a good one down and I use my evergreen webinar to continue using the webinars, exposing people to my products and or services, and not just exposing, but explaining and letting them know why they need to do business with me or whoever my client is, or whatever your business or service is, product or services. So that's the importance of webinars, guys. Start using them. If it's applicable to your business, start using them, but you can use it for any type of business. I just happen to be in the niche of working with attorneys because I worked with one, my good friend who was an attorney. Then he referred me to somebody and so on and so forth. And now I'm working with about 7 different attorneys. Now, this is something that I never really meant to generate income with because I was helping my buddy out with generating revenue, and it started working so well and he was pleased. So he started talking to other people and it just came up. So now I'm making money doing this, setting up the webinars. If they need help with the actual Facebook and native advertising, I'm helping them with that. So that's a business into and of itself. So somebody could make a ton of money, light bulb going off. If you know how to produce and promote webinars, you can help businesses generate leads by creating your own webinar business, a lead generation business. All of these companies out here pay for leads. You know, you look at insurance companies, attorneys, all types of different companies pay for leads. Mortgage brokers, all types of businesses need leads. So you can create an actual business by helping people create webinars. And I'm going to tell you guys, a lot of people don't know how to put together a good webinar. So if you can put together a good webinar, tells a great story with a call to action that makes sense, you can sell that service to your attorneys or whoever. You know, there's room out here for everybody. I just kind of fell into it. But the process is the same. You can do it for travel. You know, I've worked with a couple of hotels doing native advertising, doing webinars for them. Not travel, just I'm going on vacation, but their catering side. So doing weddings, things of that nature, events. So I've done webinars with hotels and destinations to actually show the benefits of using their catering sales department to have events there. Like I did one in Orlando and another one outside in Jacksonville. And those have been going pretty well also, because all it is an automated part of your sales process. So if you can get somebody on a webinar, you're going to be able to educate them more than email and things like that. And also, I think it's not intrusive. Now, in terms of time of webinar, I like to keep my webinars at no more than 45 minutes of content and then at least 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A, because a lot of times people will get more information from the question and answer period. And I think that's helpful when they see other people asking questions. So I wouldn't go crazy with long webinars. All right. I've been on webinars that were 2.5 hours long that I shut down because I'm like, yo, you knew it was a sales pitch coming at the end, but it was just too much fluff. I'm more for being direct, respecting people's time and respecting my own time. I don't have time to be doing 2.5 hour webinars. So you want to keep your webinar to a decent amount of time. I would say no more than an hour for the webinar. I've seen other webinars that are short, 15, 20 minutes. And if that's all it needs, then that's all you need to do. So guys, make sure you start using these tools that are at our fingertips right now to grow your business. And like I said, it's not going to be applicable to every type of business. But if you have a higher ticket type product or service, webinars man, it's great. Like I said, the attorneys I'm working with love it. And once again, light bulb goes off. If you know how to create webinars, you can go to different companies and you can help them create webinars to generate a consistent base of new leads each and every week, each and every month, each and every day. They'll pay for that. And so what I do, I charge a flat rate. I charge a half up front and then half when the webinar is done. And you can do anything you want. You can charge a percentage of ad spend. It could be 15% of whatever they spend on advertising. And you could be as hands-on or as hands-off as you want in terms of actually running the Facebook advertising or native advertising for them. You can charge for that. That's a market out there, guys. It's a market out there. Any of these businesses, security system business, man, this one company must call my house 2 or 3 times a week. I'm like, yo, dude, I got a security system. I used to be in the business. Take me off the list. But lead generation for businesses is big business. So if you create a system, your such and such webinar revenue system for insurance companies, webinar revenue system for attorneys, webinar revenue system for mortgage companies, whatever, create the process, package it, and you can go and sell it also. Like I said, this was not something that I came in and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do webinars for attorneys. It just kind of happened. But I see the results that it has and it works. And you just got to make sure that whatever industry or vertical you're in, that it makes sense for them. All right. So with attorneys, especially with like personal injury, the attorneys aren't going to see that money right away. But if a case hits, I mean, one case, I know one client, they make hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes just on one case. And the attorneys that are real smart at marketing, they know what their ROI is. They know what their return on investment is. So they're going to be like, okay, I can spend $5,700 and make $41,000. They'll take that all day, every day. Now, once again, that's just with this client. I have other clients that their fees aren't as high, so their return on investment isn't as high. It's going to be different for every client. So you can't just say it's a cookie cutter. You're going to do X, Y, and Z. You don't know until you put it all together. And you have to make sure that the webinar makes sense, that it flows correctly, and it's not too salesy. You don't want to be the used car salesman with half of your shirt hanging out the back of your pants, and the webinar is a bunch of crap. It's just a sales pitch. You want to give actionable information and good information to educate the prospective client on why they should use your business or your service. So that's today's show, guys. Before we close out, once again, please continue to spread the word about Black Entrepreneur Blueprint, the podcast, and obviously the blog. If you need to connect with me, anything long and detailed, just email. All right, jjones@blackentrepreneurblueprint.com, JAYJONES at blackentrepreneurblueprint.com, Facebook, Black Entrepreneur Blueprint, Instagram, jjones for real, jjones, the number 4, REAL, Twitter, jjones001, and also YouTube. Just go to YouTube, Black Entrepreneur Blueprint. Love you guys. See you same time next week. Peace.